We're currently in Rayong, Thailand, about 200 kilometres southeast of Bangkok. It's a working town, big on fishing, but it's also home to one of the biggest petrochemical plants in the world, which is ironic because we're here to build a solar electric boat. If you're new here, my name's Tess. My husband Ro and I are physicists, and we are in the midst of building a solar electric liveaboard catamaran. We designed the propulsion and electrical systems ourselves, as well as writing the software that runs it. And we've partnered with a boat builder here in Rayong to do the physical build, which is why we're here. Our boat build began in earnest in 2021, back when travel meant COVID tests that were more like brain probes and quarantine on the way there and quarantine on the way back. But after a flying start, let's just say that progress has been slow.
Are we going to talk about it?
What?
The elephant in the room.
What elephant?
I guess not then.
But after 4.5 years, it looks like things are moving.
It's happening.
So we've booked flights and we're here to get stuck into it. If you've seen our boat tour video, that footage was around 18 months old. So let's start by bringing you up to speed and seeing where the state of the boat is right now. There's lots of activity here at the stern, but what you can see behind all of that is that the fishing station cabinet doors have now been cut out. They've finished the frame around the rear door and they put a fresh coat of paint on this back rear wall. But what you can also see is the high voltage inverter charger mounted inside that space onto the port side of the flybridge stairs. That's what lets us charge our 700 volts propulsion battery from our solar and also gives us AC for the rest of the boat. Moving into the salon, they've been running some plumbing in the ceilings here. This is plumbing for the flybridge. There's air conducting going in. But most notable here is the multitude of electrical cabling. The reason there's so many in this particular location is those plywood boxes that you can see, they're cabinets that are accessed actually from the flybridge, and they're one of two main electrical spaces that we have on our boat, the other one being our electrical room. I'll show you what's in these boxes once we get to the flybridge. But it feels great to finally see some cables being drawn, because it means we're one step closer to being able to test our system and to get out on the water. In the cabins, we have beginnings of electrical fit out as well. I'll just show you some of the master cabin here. It's kind of hard to see. There's a lot of stuff in the ceilings and the walls, but all the cabins are at the same stage. The team have also been working on the ceiling panels. These will eventually be sent away to be wrapped in leather. You can see here under the bed, we've got one of our air handlers. We have a chiller-based air conditioning system with two chillers, one in each hull. And each of the cabins has its own air handler. The salon has several. And in the front cabin here, you can also see some of our ceiling hatches that have been installed. Moving back outside and up to the flybridge. Up here, they're making last changes before the final coats of paint. They've added some drains around our underseat storage, added a little bit extra storage, in fact. And you can see some of the wiring for the solar roof. A lot of the holes that you can see are actually just temporary and they're going to get sealed up before the painting. The permanent access panels you can't see here, they're actually on the outside. If you turn around and look at the helm, you can see these orange pieces of core flute. They're covering up the access panels that I mentioned when we were down at the salon. In here, we've got a lot of our navigation and communication equipment. So we've got two Garmin GPS map chart plotters. In fact, we've just got the black box version, which means that we've got just the brain from the chart plotter that'll sit in here. And then there'll be third-party screens, two screens on each helm, one helm here and one helm in the salon. In here also things like our VHF, AIS, Starlink, 4G booster. We've got one of our 6 digital switching units, which is a Connect 50. as well as a Garmin BlueNet gateway box, because 2 of our sonars use the old Garmin networking standard, which means they can't plug straight into our chart plotters. So most of the cables have been drawn up to this point. You saw that in the salon, but nothing's connected just yet. And the same thing in our electrical room. Full of promise, but lots of work still to be done. It has all of our AC breakers, 2 more digital switching boxes, master control unit for the digital switching, a lot of networking for our cameras and sonar, and a whole bunch of other things. All in all, a decent start to the electrical install, but quite a ways to go. Definitely not ready for us to start testing our system. Getting our drivetrain installed is a really big milestone in our build. At the moment, we just have a very expensive rowboat. So it'll be really nice to get the engines in. They've been sitting here in the yard ready to be installed for quite some time. But you saw from our footage on the stern, there is quite a lot of activity now in our engine rooms, which is really exciting to see. The team's been busy prepping the engine rooms for that install. So far, they've installed things like ducting for cables, engine room ventilation. They also need to do some sound insulation.
Yeah, it's a nice big engine room.
Meanwhile, our diesels have been sitting there on their lonesome on the factory floor, and that's because our electric motors, gearbox, clutch have all had a little bit of an outing out to the workshop. And that's where things start to get really interesting. But that deserves a dedicated video, so I'm going to make you wait. But before you go, something else exciting did happen while we were here. We're getting what's called a nacelle or a Wavebreaker added to our boat. You might ask why. We already had a finished bow. If you look at our boat, you'll notice that we have a solid foredeck. Rather than a sailing catamaran, which often has this forward beam and trampolines, we have a solid deck here. It's very common in power catamarans. It gives you a lot of extra living space, but it does come with a big trade-off. Your boat's now more susceptible to what's called slamming. That's when waves hit the underside of the boat and make this big thud. Now, our boat is built to ocean rating, so CE category A, which means it is engineered to be able to handle that kind of load. So storms, slamming, everything. And we do have a really, really high bridge deck. But engineering to a standard and engineering for comfort on board are 2 very, very different things. Something can be structurally sound, but still make life on board miserable.
Have a listen to this.
One particular aspect of our boat that makes this even more valuable is that our hulls are very narrow. It's one of the main reasons we chose this particular hull. Thinner hulls means that we can better cut through the waves. It means that it takes less power to move us through the water. And for an electric boat, that means extra range. The downside, though, is that we don't have a lot of buoyancy in the bows, which means that if we do get into waves and the front of the boat starts to dive, we are actually more likely to dive deeper and increase the chances that we'll slam. So our boat builder offered to add a Wavebreaker to our boat. And what it does is add reserve buoyancy. That's what slows down and arrests that bow dive. It also softens any of the slamming that does occur because it means you now have some more curved surfaces breaking the water as you're entering rather than the deck doing a big belly flap into the wave. The downside of adding a Wavebreaker is now we've got this big additional volume underneath the front deck of our boat. Because it's sitting now lower than the main deck, we're actually going to slam sooner. Getting that balance right between slamming sooner but softer is one that we wanted to really get right. And really for us, with such a high bridge deck, this really is a backup option. Only in the worst case scenarios will we actually need this. So the design goal was 0 intervention under normal conditions and then gradual response when slamming actually does start.
Exactly the right amount for our current purposes.
That's built into our design in 2 different ways. First, we've set the Wavebreaker really high above the waterline. The bow has to dive pretty seriously before the Wavebreaker even makes contact with the water. So day to day, we don't have any additional drag, even if the conditions are a little bit choppy. But when it gets really bad and we're in danger of slamming, then the Wavebreaker will be there. And the second aspect is the shape itself. We actually made it concave, which basically means that at the bottom it's very, very narrow, and then it slowly starts to taper out and then progressively faster and faster and faster until it gets to the maximum width. What that means in practice is that it doesn't engage all at once. If you have a very shallow dive, you just get a little bit of extra buoyancy, only a little bit of extra drag to slow down the boat. But as the dive gets more serious, the interaction starts to increase to match it, almost imperceptibly at first, and then more and more. So the idea is that the Wavebreaker is essentially invisible under normal conditions and then progressively more and more present and reacting when we need it. Just enough support, but no more. While we were here, the team already started installing it. You can see the ribs that form the internal structure of the Wavebreaker attached to the underside of the foredeck. And then after enclosing it, now they're starting to fair it, ready for painting. And in exciting news, we now have live camera views of our boat. So we'll be able to see the progress as it's happening, and we'll share some of that with you, even after we return home. This is one of 6 modules that make up our propulsion battery. It's a 700 volt, 254 kilowatt hour battery. We've custom made this battery ourselves. It's made out of lithium iron phosphate blade cells. In our battery video, I showed that we'd already constructed one of our modules. We still had 5 to go. We physically assembled the second one, but unfortunately our tin bus bars, which are the little electrical connections between the cells, didn't get here in time. So unfortunately that job has been postponed till next visit. But I will mention 2 things that came up in comments in the previous video. One is whether the cells are okay after 3 years in storage. We've confirmed the voltage on our batteries hasn't dropped much of anything, which is really, really comforting. Probably not unexpected though, because when they get shipped from the manufacturer, they're not fully charged, which is for safety reasons during transport, but it's also the Goldilocks zone for battery storage. At that state of charge, the lithium iron phosphate chemistry is in a fairly stable equilibrium, and it's inherently resistant to the reactions that cause degradation and self-discharge. But we will test them all again just before we hook up the battery, just to be sure. The other thing that came out of our battery video is that we had a lot of people saying that we needed to compress our cells. We're not compressing our cells. In fact, we're doing quite the opposite. To understand why that is, we need to think about why we would want to compress a lithium battery cell. And there are 2 main things. The first is extending their lifetime. As lithium battery cells charge, they grow a little bit. And in that process, the different electrode layers that are in the battery separate slightly. That can permanently damage the battery. Keeping the cells compressed so that those layers don't separate quite as much means the battery lasts a bit longer. So some manufacturers will recommend that you compress the cells. Basically means just clamp them together and put pressure on them to keep those layers nice and flat and well adhered. And that increases the lifetime of their cells. In my battery video, I explained that the long, thin shape of our blade cells means that they can dissipate heat very, very effectively. And so they simply don't have that same degree of swelling that the prismatic cells have. And indeed, our manufacturer does not recommend compressing our cells. The second reason you might want to compress the cells is to protect the terminals. And the reason for this is if you have a bunch of cells stacked neatly together, any swelling that you have, even if it's very, very small, like the blade cells, they put an intense stress on the rigid bus bar that connects them, and then also the terminals of each cell.
We want them to expand and contract and not cause pressure on the cell next to it. So, I mean, look at these gaps. So that means there's stress on these terminals.
Compression is one way to solve that problem. The other is to use flexible bus bars, but a simpler solution is just to space the battery cells apart. And in our case, we're not space constrained, so we can do that. You'll notice in this footage that our blade cells have small gaps between them. The brackets that we use to hold them in place actually provide that spacing. These are commercial brackets specifically designed for our S-Volt cells, but there's other variations. I'll put a link in the description to them if you're interested. So our new Wavebreaker is taking shape. Our engine rooms are being prepped. Our drivetrain components have been sent to the workshop. Next episode, they'll come back with some new additions and we'll dive into the electric drivetrain.